Good afternoon and happy Thursday. Welcome to this week's edition of Offit Kurman's Remote Rundown. I'm Jim Reese, Director of Business Development at Offit Kurman, and each week I am joined with labor and employment attorneys Russell Berger, Sarah Sawyer, and Veronica Yu for a conversation about the latest and most relevant employment issues related to COVID-19 and advice for owners and employers on how to best deal with these issues. Sarah, start us off with today's conversation and what's developed in the COVID-19 world.
Yeah, so now that we're on about month 5 of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're really starting to see some of the things play out that we've been working through with our clients. So mainly as it relates to making sure that you're maintaining a safe workplace and making accommodations for employees and working through all of these employment issues that we've been talking about every week. So we're definitely seeing both in our own practices and statistically increases in claims or requests by employees. So I know I've been seeing a lot of ADA reasonable accommodation requests that are related to COVID. So a lot of those involve either pregnant employees or employees who are high risk due to pre-existing health conditions, and they're asking for accommodations to feel safe in the workplace or either to work remotely. And so that's something that a lot of employers are having to field those types of questions and really work through that with employees. So that's been something that's been an uptick, and we've also seen an increase in discrimination claims and things like that already so far statistically as well. So it's something that's definitely need to be keeping an eye out for. And then recently, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, so OSHA, has been also seeing a increase in whistleblower claims. So people, drawing attention to the fact that companies that they work for are not being compliant and not taking proper safety measures. And they're also just overburdened at this point with trying to just keep up with making sure that they're processing complaints and doing inspections and making sure that there's safe working conditions. So it's really, we're seeing a lot of these things come into play here now that we are on month 5, and different companies and employers are doing different things to, they're all at different levels of compliance and different levels of making sure that they're keeping workers safe. And so some of them that are not taking it seriously or are maybe not, maybe denying a reasonable request or not putting the proper safety measures in place are actually seeing the effects of that now and are facing some actual risk.
Yeah, along the OSHA claim vein, we're seeing claims where employees are saying they're being retaliated against for complaining about the work site or office safety with their employer. And this could be like a disgruntled employee just filing a claim just to cause some havoc on their way out. But basically what you'll receive is a notice from the Department of Labor basically laying out that there has been a complaint made. The letter is very short, and you have 10 days to respond. And I would just like to say, as a practical point, especially if you have an attorney, you can request additional time to respond. And as Sarah mentioned, with this uptick in OSHA claims, it may be worth, while you have the opportunity to respond, to give a really strong response and take the time to do that with proper documentation showing that you had the right safety precautions in order and that the employee was terminated for another legitimate business reason, because it will shortcut this lengthy process by hopefully resolving the matter sooner for you. So it might be worth it to take that additional time if you can get it. I'd also state that, there was, in this past week, Maryland opened up this hotline to report COVID-19 violations. And I think the point of the hotline was so you can either email or call. It can be anonymous, or you can give your information. And I think it was intended to make complaints about social distancing and non-compliance with the masking order, which, it serves two purposes. I think it's to help enforce these orders and also increase compliance. So it's fairly new, and we're yet to see if this is going to have an impact on employers and employees making anonymous complaints through this hotline. So that's just another aspect where we might see increases in these whistleblower type cases.
Yeah, and that's an interesting issue because, in general, in order to have a wrongful termination claim against an employer, there's got to be a law, because we're an at-will state. So you have to be violating something or doing something, retaliate. An employer would have to be retaliating against an employee in an unlawful manner. But there is kind of this narrow subset of what's called a common law wrongful termination case in Maryland. And obviously, there's no case law on whether reporting a violation of a governor's executive order in COVID-19 times would constitute protection under that potential tort claim. But it's something to think about. And so certainly from an employer standpoint, I wouldn't suggest cavalierly taking retaliatory action against anybody who's making those types of complaints. And to circle back a little bit to something Sarah said, we certainly have seen an uptick in ADA claims, and even to a broader extent, some other Title VII claims. And Title VII is the law that protects against the federal law that protects against discrimination. But I've seen already gender-based claims, men and women being treated differently with respect to COVID policies. Same thing for race and national origin. Certain groups are being treated differently in the way either safety policies are being rolled out or layoffs are being determined. So those claims are out there right now. They're starting, as we kind of predicted a few months ago. Those things are starting to land, and those claims are starting to get made. So obviously, if you still have the ability to control it, with respect to what's going on in your operation right now. So you want to make sure that your policies are being applied equally across the board. You're not discriminating against anybody or any particular class in terms of how they're being applied. And in addition, as Sarah mentioned with the ADA, you're giving employees who are coming forward and claiming a disability and a need for an accommodation, you're going through the interactive process with those employees, and you're making sure that you're following the rules, you're following the proper process for treating those claims seriously. So you're not opening yourself up to some kind of retaliation or discrimination claim.
And I've definitely seen in that vein that it can be a painstaking process in some instances. If it feels like a lot when businesses are already under a lot of pressure right now with a lot of other things to keep track of and to be cognizant of, because right now it's really a lot of businesses are really just trying to stay profitable and stay afloat amongst this pandemic. And so it's hard to be keeping an eye on all of these different pieces and making sure that you're taking all the proper precautions. And I know that I've seen with some of my clients, it feels like another thing they have to be looking out for, another process they have to put in place, another thing that they need to be spending their time on while they're still trying to run their business and pivot and and stay alive during the pandemic. So I think it's just good to be reminded of these things and keep these things in mind as employees are making certain requests and going through that process, even though there's a lot on every employer's plate right now, to still go through that process with employees and make sure that you're covering your bases and making sure that you've got all the latest information and know what to do in that regard. So that's kind of my takeaway for this week is, there's no lack of things as always to be paying attention to, but with a 30% jump in whistleblower complaints to OSHA, with this increase in ADA requests, and then the inevitable increase in cases filed when those requests are denied, that it's really important to keep all the plates spinning and make sure that you're not taking any shortcuts on some of these other processes when it comes to employees.
Yeah, I really think a point to really drive home here is all these laws that have always applied still apply, and at times of crisis, they're likely to be utilized by employees more. So you're going to be pushed on it more. I mean, it's not like you didn't have to go through the reasonable accommodation process with someone that claimed a disability previously. It's not like, you could ignore OSHA previously. So all these rules are already in place. They're nothing new in that sense. But the applications are new, and certainly the pressure is going to be turned up because that's the pressure's turned up on employees.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is very similar to both Sarah and Russell's, but the pandemic's really unprecedented. It's had a really big impact on businesses, and the rest of the life and the world. And so I've seen some of our clients relying on that as almost the first and foremost important thing when dealing with employee issues during the pandemic. But I think they sometimes forget, even though there's this big COVID issue going on, the traditional employment laws still apply. So while you might have a knee-jerk reaction to base your decision simply on the pandemic and how unprecedented it is, you have to remember to do a holistic overview of all the different, employment law pitfalls that you could run into by making a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny you say that, because even for me, like the first time I got a call where someone said, I've got an employee who's tested positive. What can I tell my colleagues? Like my initial instinct was, well, this is a pandemic and we're early on. Like you got to tell people, and we got to protect against this, and we got to guard against the spread. And like even for me, like probably already knew this in the back of my head. Like I had to take a step back and think, okay, well the ADA says we can't, and there isn't really an exception for a pandemic, so we're just going to comply with this, even though this is a unique time. Like we're still applying kind of some of these traditional rules.
Well, seems like a good place to pause. Before we hit the trivia question, I do have a couple of things, questions or comments. I know that Veronica and Sarah joined me in congratulating Russell on his new addition to the family, baby Blake, a nice, pretty large baby girl. We hope that she and mom are healthy and getting better and feeling well. Also, Russell, I happened to notice on social media someone mistakenly identified your hairstyle as a mullet. You want to set the record straight here publicly?
Yeah, as I understand, a mullet, it's business in the front, party in the back. But since I haven't gotten a haircut, and I have a good reason, given that my wife was pregnant and we now have a newborn, I haven't wanted to venture out. It's just a party all over with my hair now. It's long and all over.
Party at Russell's house. All right. So here's today's trivia question. What is the most overused word or phrase that has surfaced during the pandemic? And we'll start with Russell, which is going to make it really tough for Veronica and Sarah. The most overused word or phrase that has surfaced during the pandemic.
My most overused phrase, I think, would be post-COVID. We talk a lot. We've been talking for 5.5 months now about post-COVID, what we're going to do after COVID, and it just seems like we're going to be talking about it for another extended period of time. So I'm kind of sick of hearing post-COVID, just because it's a little salt in the wound at this point.
Okay, that's a surprise answer. Veronica, how about you?
6 feet, 6 feet, Jim.
Yes. Another surprise answer. I'm looking for the obvious, but you guys are sharp. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I'm going to go with the obvious, the new normal, which is
That's true.
very used.
What happened to pivot?
Oh, pivots. Yeah, pivots are going.
Yeah, the new normal. I like that too. Well, that's good. Those are 3 good answers. Good thinking, gang. That was great. Good to see everybody today. And we'll see you next week for next week's edition of Remote Rundown. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.